Hey everybody, welcome to Co-Creating with Collin and Stephanie. I'm Collin, I'm a spiritual guide and medium.
My name's Stephanie, and I am a transformational life coach.
Thank you so much for joining us. If you're watching us on YouTube, please, if you like the video, click the like button. If you would like to subscribe to us, subscribe. And if you're listening to the podcast also, if you would like to subscribe to our podcast, please feel free to do so. No pressure. But today, we're going to talk about oracle cards and tarot cards, which both of us have some familiarity with, but I guess I'm a little more.
You have a lot more. Yeah. I'm going to learn a lot today.
So some people watching will know what they are. Some people won't. So I guess I think it would be easiest for me to just talk about how I discovered them. I had heard about tarot cards, since I was a little kid, but they just sort of sounded like this. I didn't really know exactly what they were. I think I've probably seen scenes in a movie or two growing up where there was like a fortune teller who used them, but I didn't understand what they were. And I definitely didn't know that oracle cards existed at all, or what the relationship between oracle and tarot was. And my first exposure was I had a intuitive nudge to go into Barnes and Noble one day when I was visiting San Diego from Los Angeles, which was not unusual because I love Barnes and Noble, but I actually had a real nudge, like I was supposed to go get a particular book is what I thought. And I went to various sections. I ended up in the sort of spirituality, self-help, whatever section that is. And I was really drawn to, and I think I have it here with me.
Oh, right on.
I was drawn to, and I just saw the spine because it was, on a shelf.
Nice.
And it said the Enchanted Map. And it drew my attention because the art. I'm a huge Dungeons and Dragons freak. So it had that kind of element to it. And I was like, what is this? And I picked it out and read the back of it, which has a little bit of a description, and it has like 3 of the cards are pictured on the back. And I was just like, it just felt right. This is it. This is what I should purchase today. And I don't know what they are, but I'll take them home and figure them out. And so when I got back to LA, I now know there's a term, I unboxed them. You first open your oracle cards, and there is a little book.
Wow, that's beautiful.
That came with it, and then there's all these cards, which are beautiful. They're still beautiful. They have this gold.
I love that. My deck of cards, oracle. Yeah. Well, they're goddess. Yeah, oracle cards. Yeah.
They look like on the top.
Ooh.
And individually, all the cards have different paintings or artists.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, and the ones in this deck, I mean, there's a lot of amazing art in oracle and tarot card decks, but this one is still one of my all-time favorites.
Wow.
But I still didn't know what they were, so I had to read this book, like this book, and figure out like, what do you do? And it was really cool. And basically, what I came to understand was that this had been created by, a spiritual person who wanted to create a tool for people to get some guidance in a creative, interesting way using cards. And basically it could be different things. It could be either to help you get in touch with your own intuition about something that maybe you've got so much sort of crazy thinking about something, you're not clear, and the card might help you get clear on your intuition, like what your heart and spirit knows about something. It could also be that it could help you get guidance depending on your view and belief in a higher power. You could get guidance from that force or whatever you believe through the card. And so I started doing them just for myself, but it took me a while to get into it, actually. I would pull it out and I would do like a reading or two for myself, and I would be like super excited, and then I just sort of would like put it away. I think because I didn't know how it would fit in my life. I'm a Virgo. I have to know how everything fits.
Ooh,
and
okay.
So
good to know.
Yeah, but eventually I think you were the first person like after doing a few for myself, I was like, this would be even more fun if I did it for someone else.
Mm.
But I was trying to figure out like who would be open to that, like who would really think it would be okay and not too weird and not, whatever. And so you were the first person I did one for. I think we were at
Mm.
Twigs coffee shop in San Diego.
Oh,
For some
wow.
reason, I have
Okay.
this memory of, I think we were just meeting for coffee, but then towards the end, I was like,
Oh, yes.
"Are you
You
up
were
for
like,
something
"Hey."
cool?"
I'm like, "Yeah, sure."
Yeah. So I did a reading for you, and then I did subsequent ones for you. And one of the ones I did we did on the phone from LA, and I just
Yes.
sent you text pictures. Is one of
Yes.
my all I will remember it forever. It's one of my all-time favorite 3-card readings. Um, but yeah, so basically the way that you use them is you pick a card, and at random you usually shuffle them, and then this book, so this card deck was created by Colette Baron Reed, and I later learned that she is like one of the largest, most well-known creators of oracle card decks. She's created, I think it's like up to 20 different decks now. I didn't know that at the time. I thought this might be the only thing like it, which is funny
Yeah.
now because now there's like hundreds of different types of oracle card decks. But
Yeah.
essentially, she has a little ritual in here, which I really love, which sort of, if you're doing a reading for someone else, you just sort of ask them to visualize this sort of scene in your mind to get you in sort of a spiritual open place.
Mm.
And then you pull cards, and there's different ways you can pull cards. You can pull 1, you can pull 3, you can pull 7, whatever. And basically what I did is I pulled a card. It has a number on it typically, and then a name, and then that corresponds to, I don't know if you've seen this one.
What does it say?
It's come
Come
together.
together. Oh,
2 giraffes kissing
beautiful.
with a pelican.
Number 8. Yeah, and a
Yeah,
heart with a, yeah,
yeah.
that's great.
So we just go in the book to card number 8. It's they're in numerical order, and then there's a description
Oh,
that
yeah.
you can read, and then some decks, I would say most decks, assume that there's a different meaning if when you draw it, it comes up right side up or right side down. So
So
this,
then you don't always keep the deck right side up. It is.
most people just shuffle the cards, and like what a lot of people do. You can shuffle them any way that feels right for you, but
Right.
a lot a lot of people like put them on a table, almost like you're a little kid, and you just like
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
spread
So
them around like that.
got it.
So that ends up that
Yeah.
they're not all upright.
Okay.
You know? Right away, though, I've had an issue with that because a lot of people have experience with tarot. So tarot, which is a little bit of a different animal, I'll talk about it in a moment. But tarot has a history of, most people who read tarot do that to shuffle the cards, and the meanings are different depending on whether the card is upright or reversed. And a lot of the reversed meanings in traditional tarot tend to be kind of gloomy. And for those, and there's all sorts of different card readers, but there are some who, feel completely comfortable interpreting a card to mean something very terrible in your future.
Mm.
And the reverse position is typically that for those people, that something bad is going to happen, and instead of like something good will happen to you based on the card being upright, but then like the lack of that or the opposite of that is going to happen to you, and it's going to be bad. And so reverse cards are kind of like, they're always tricky for me, and I feel like they're tricky for a lot of people because of that legacy from the tarot, where it's like,
So what do you do with that?
well, I mean, I was helped by Colette, because once I started to figure out like, oh, she's like a personality, like she has a whole YouTube channel and she does readings for everybody once a week and all this sort of stuff. I started following her on YouTube, and she talks about that, and she talks about how for her it just means that the reverse card position, it's about this, it means that the topic is the same, or the advice or the guidance is the same, but it means that you're having a special challenge in that area of your life or with whatever the reading is about, and you need extra help. So the reverse position is not
I
telling you
love
something
that.
bad's going to
I
happen.
love that. That's
It's like the
beautiful.
universe giving you extra help with it.
Thank you,
Um,
Colette.
yeah. So I tell everybody, when I do my first reading for them, that I don't do any um, readings with any sort of dark, result.
Yeah.
Like I ask
Yeah.
the universe, not to say that difficult and challenging things aren't going to happen to people, but
Right.
I just don't want to be in the business of predicting that kind of stuff through my card readings. If other readers want to do that, that's up to them, and if people want
Mm.
to go to those readers, that's up to them.
Nor do we want to perpetuate that energy, right? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, for me, I use the cards. I love the cards, and I think now I know there's a global community of people who are like obsessed with tarot. Some people are
yeah.
tarot only. Like there's sort of people that feel like tarot is like the one true type of card, and oracle cards are kind of like the
Yeah.
diet Sprite of tarot. Um, because the But there's now a global community of people that are really jazzed about cards, um, and I guess I'm one of them. I think just really briefly, the difference that, as I understand, I'm still learning tarot. I've been learning it very slowly for a very long time. I have many tarot decks, at least two of which I can show you. But so with oracle cards, the decks, the assumption is that the cards are very specific, relatively specific in their meaning. And sometimes the card is very explicit. Like there's one in one of my decks called career change. And it, like, the meaning of that card is you're going to experience a career change. It's very specific. And typically the explanations of the meaning of the cards in books like these are very specific to that. So there's some interpretation, but not as much as tarot. Tarot, it's almost like learning a foreign language, because there's I think there's something like 72 cards. That's terrible that I can't remember it, but I think there's like 72 cards. They all have a different description, different picture on them, and the meaning of each individual card is sort of a much wider, broader meaning. It's not
Mhm.
specifically like you're going to
Yeah.
experience a career change.
Yeah.
It's as I understand it, like a lot of the cards are sort of like this card is typically to do with work or job, and it implies that there will be a shift or something like that. So you have sort of that general understanding, but it could be like a whole bunch of different things. And when you look at the spread, what they call the spread of cards, which that's just basically a configuration of when you pull the cards and put them down on the table.
Mhm.
You can do readings with a spread, which means that you're asking spirit or the universe for a card to mean something specific to your question or what the reading is about. So in other
Okay.
words, like one of the most common spreads um, everywhere is the past, present, future spread, which is
Oh,
you just draw
right.
3 cards.
Yeah.
The card on the left, you're asking the universe to say what about my past is informing this situation or area of my
Oh.
life or
Uh-huh.
question.
Yeah.
And the middle card is what is the present situation with this situation or question,
Mhm.
and what is the near future likely hold
I like that.
regarding that. So,
Yeah.
but you can go, there's 12 card spreads, there's 16 card spreads, there's all this kind of stuff. But the spread tends to be more important in tarot, because where a card falls in the spread in tarot can change the meaning far more dramatically than an oracle card that kind of has a fixed meaning. Um, so like if you get like the 3 of Wands, it could mean one thing if it was in the past position. It could mean something entirely different if it was in the future position. If you were doing a spread that the positions weren't to do with time, but were to do with like, something like, what do I need to know? And that's what whatever card you draw, that's what you're asking the universe to tell you about. It could be vastly different than if it was in some other sort of position in that same spread. So tarot is something, and generally speaking, tarot readers sort of give themselves or are encouraged to have their own sort of interpretation of the tarot, so that
Oh,
it's almost like I guess I can't really think of a great metaphor, but um, with an oracle card reader, like if you're only using oracle cards, you're more likely to get like a very specific reading that matches whatever's in the book for those cards. With
mhm.
a tarot reading, if they only do tarot, typically they don't use books, although there are books that explain and websites that explain, have different viewpoints on the different meanings of the different cards.
Right.
But typically when you go to like a tarot reader and you pay for a reading, what they're kind of advertising or saying they do is they know what all the cards mean. They know what they mean in different positions and different spreads. They're very versed in it, in the language of it. So they won't be using a book. They'll be like interpreting it live based on their knowledge and experience and just looking at the cards, which I admire very much. And I'm aspiring to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
at the
Well,
moment,
it
I still,
sounds to me like you were definitely heading in that direction. You were more there than you were before.
yeah, I think, and that's what I kind of really like about tarot. Even though I got into oracle cards first, and I, I had a long time where I was just doing oracle card readings before I even like got into the tarot at all. But what I now realize is that tarot came first. Tarot cards were invented in the Middle Ages in
Oh,
Europe,
okay.
and so they're very old for the most part. Oracle cards, I'm not sure when the first deck was created, but it sort of looks to me like somewhere in the 1960s, so
Oh,
very
okay.
recent.
Oh, yeah. Very.
But
Yeah.
people who make oracle cards clearly understand the tradition of the tarot. In fact, in a lot of oracle card decks, you'll have a card that's like very similar to a card in the traditional tarot deck.
So if
Um,
someone were new at any of this, what
mhm.
would it just depend on the person as far as what deck they would go into, whether it be Oracle or Tarot? What would
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a lot of things. I think if I were to give someone advice, I would say like just start with something that resonates with you. Like if you're really curious about it, um, I mean, we're in the COVID era when we're recording this, so the spiritual shops in Los Angeles are closed right now. But at some point when you can go to a spiritual shop, most of them have, at least the ones in Southern California that I've been to, they have like an oracle card area, and you can get them at Barnes and Noble and places like that. But it's catch as catch can. Some stores have them, or they'll have one deck or something in the spiritual section. But most spiritual shops that carry crystals and books on astrology and things like that they'll sell tarot and or oracle cards, and you can just go look at the boxes and kind of just see what resonates with you.
yeah.
There's a spiritual store in Pasadena that I've been to several times, and I'm blanking on the name of it. I feel terrible. But they actually have an enormous case of oracle and tarot
Wow.
cards, and they have, for each deck they sell, they have one that they've unboxed,
Okay. I
and it's
love
all torn
stores like
out.
that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so
So
you can flip through
sometimes
the
just the
cards.
3 images they have on the back is not enough for me. I want to be
And
able
I've done
to.
that. I've bought decks because the ones like on the back of the box or that they show on Amazon, the 3 that they show are so amazing. And then I get the deck and it's like 20 of the 52 cards. I'm like, I don't like the art,
Yeah,
or it's
yeah,
weird. But
yeah.
yeah. So and also if you happen to know somebody that has an oracle card deck or a
Right,
tarot card deck,
yeah.
you can ask to look at it, and
So
see.
I have a
uh,
funny story about that. So
yeah.
I had a friend send me an image via text one day, and I loved it. It was at the time I didn't know, but it was from this
Yeah.
goddess guidance oracle cards.
Yes.
But it was, let me see if I can find it. Oh, here she is. Lakshmi, I think it's called.
Yes.
Bright future. And she sent me, ta-da! So she texted me the image, and I thought it was gorgeous. I
I was
loved
never
it.
hers,
So
by
I,
the
and so I saved the picture, I saved the
way.
image, and I kept it in my photo album on my iPhone. Loved it, loved it, loved it. And then I was sitting at my chiropractor's office one day and she had this deck. She had a few different decks in her bookshelf of a lot of different information. And I thought, oh my God, it's beautiful. So I picked it up and I'm giving myself, shuffling. And I find this image and I was like, oh my God, I have this. I didn't know this was the deck it came from. And so I went out and bought this deck just for so I could have this card. And I just had it on a little card holder in my on my dresser for the longest time. So yeah, so that was how I ended up buying the Goddess Guidance Oracle cards. So, and
Yeah, I
they're
feel
like you said too, they have the gold lining on the side and
yeah, I mean,
and
typically
they're
they're
all
made of
different.
like fairly thick cardstock, and there's just something
Yes.
really just aesthetically wonderful about holding them in your hands and everything. Yeah, I mean that card actually, so I have it as well. I keep this card on my desk at all times because anytime I look at it, it calms me down, which is, I have
Right.
anxiety, so it's like very
Yeah.
helpful.
Well, we
It
were
really
talking
does.
about that
This
earlier.
card literally reduces my stress, and I
Yeah.
think it's a testament to there's so much amazing. I mean, I'm a creative person, I'm a musician, I'm a writer as well. I'm not much of a visual artist, but I love visual art, and like there's some of the art on Oracle
He's
and
being
tarot cards
extremely
is
modest,
just
y'all.
incredible. It's just incredible, and it's so the artist in me gets jazzed about the artwork that
Yeah,
goes
yeah,
into it
they're
as well.
beautiful.
Yeah. So
So, okay,
uh,
so
yeah,
well, it was kind of like what you were talking about earlier, is just going with what feels right, what we're feeling
yeah.
like, listening to that call. A lot of people like poo-poo that away, like, we
Hmm.
ignore those little nudges, and it's
Hmm.
like I just find that the more I listen to that nudge, um, it never steers me wrong.
Hmm.
And I'm always like, oh yeah. And the more I listen to it, the more I get that validation of like, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to be listening to.
Absolutely.
There's something greater than myself guiding me,
Yeah. Yeah. I
directing
mean,
me.
actually, I mean, I feel like even though this is probably my second favorite deck, it's hard to choose because I love them all so much. And I have probably around 40 decks now.
Do you
Uh,
really? Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
Yeah. That's actually the table behind me with the purple tablecloth. Yeah. Oh, that's the wrong way. I get so tangled up on Zoom like this. But you can see they're all sitting
Yeah.
here. I have them all.
Wow. Excuse me.
And it's one of the few times, I mean, every time I buy one, I'm always sort of like, I don't want to buy too many because I don't want to like stop appreciating the ones that I have.
Yeah.
But it's one of the few things in my life where I've ever bought like that many of something and I use all of them.
Do you really?
I do. Yeah.
Wow. Do you
Mainly for readings
alternate
for myself.
weekly, or what do you do? How do
I mean,
you
I do a
pick?
reading for myself every night,
Okay.
just to get some guidance and help for whatever the next day is going to bring.
Okay.
But yeah, and I've done a few reading. I'm breaking into doing readings for money for people just from the internet or whatever. I
It's
haven't
awesome.
invested a lot of time in letting people know that I do that. But I've done it a little bit and it's amazing. And it's actually easier to do readings for people I don't know, which
And
was an interesting
so if
discovery.
someone listening or watching was interested, what would they do to contact you if you want to tell them right now? Because they might be wanting to know that and you can write it
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, you can. Well, the easiest way is my website, collinworster.com. You can book a reading on there if you want to, just directly, or my contact information is on there if you'd like some more information. Also on Instagram as Collin Worster Spiritual Guide and Medium, all spelled out with no spaces or punctuation.
Yes.
But I was going to say something about, I was going to say this is probably my second favorite deck overall, but
Is that the Enchanted Map one?
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's perfect that Spirit chose this as my first deck because I'm in love with something called the hero's journey, which is a concept that was sort of, I hate to say invented because it's more like he discovered it, but Joseph Campbell, who is a professor and author until he for many years until he passed, wrote a book called The Hero's Journey where he essentially looked through the mythology stories of all sorts of different nations and cultures throughout history, and realized there was this sort of common theme of a
Mm,
journey that sort of seemed consistent. And his theory was that humans have this almost encoded into like our DNA,
mm,
that we want to have these hero journeys ourselves, and we want to watch other people's heroes journeys. And most films, but especially films that come out of Hollywood, follow the hero's journey, and there's like a, there's like a format to it, and there's
mhm.
a lot of flexibility within it, but there are certain things that kind of have to happen in the hero's journey. And I've always been fascinated by that whole thing. um, there's another book, and I'm blanking on his name, which I feel terrible about, but there's a book called The Writer's Journey, which was written by a guy who, I'm going to say his last name is Vogler. I think it's Vogler, Vogler. He was a script reader for Disney's film studios,
Mm,
and he was a huge fan of Campbell's work and a big believer in the hero's journey. And he started using the hero's journey framework as a guide to like sort of analyze where screenplays were getting off, like where their
oh,
flaws were.
yeah.
Um, and he developed a little booklet for himself, and then it got around Hollywood. That Christopher Vogler is his name. Finally remembered it. But it got around Hollywood that he had this sort of cheat sheet for how to read a script and find out what's working and what isn't. And so he started making photocopies for people, and then eventually he turned it into a book so people could just buy it. Um, but I love that book as well, and it talks about how not only are Hollywood movies a hero's journey, but each of our own lives in real life is a hero's journey, and we usually have
Mm,
many hero's journeys as we go through life. And
nice.
so the enchanted map, the concept behind this deck is that when you pull a card, you're finding out like what point on your journey
Oh,
you are at, so that you can understand it better and
oh,
make good choices, and
mm,
get to the next place you need to be more
mm.
easily, and that sort of thing. So
And is the hero, because I think of the hero's journey as being more of a male dominant thing, and so it's not, it's just a human being.
correct. I mean, most mythological stories are male, just because early human culture tended to be very misogynist.
Mm,
But yeah, no, it completely applies to men and women. Um, the film that pops into my head, but it's literal. Almost all Hollywood movies follow it, but Wonder Woman, you
mm.
know,
Love that movie.
yeah, follows it, to a T, to the letter. And it's her journey. And that's the thing about the hero's journey, is like it understands that all stories involve lots of characters, but in the hero's journey there's always a central character,
Central.
and the story, and you can play with this in all sorts of different ways, but the story of it follows the hero's journey framework.
Mm,
And I mean, the basic parts of it are that they start out in a kind of normal world where everything is kind of stable. Something crazy happens. They get whisked into another world ish. Um, they refuse the journey first, but then they accept it. They have a mentor in the early going who leaves them at some point so that they can continue on their own. They go into like the belly of the beast, kind of, there's sort of like the height of the challenge that they have to get through.
mhm.
And then when they get through that, they usually like get the prize, which can be anything. And then they have to take the prize back to where they started from, because that sort of shows them, among other things, that they have changed as a result of this journey, and they come back to where
Mm,
they started. And the people that are where the story started are kind of in awe of how they have become like a higher level
mm,
person as a
yeah.
result of this journey.
Oh,
Um,
that's beautiful.
yeah. So,
Yeah. So how do you, because you say you have 40 decks, and do you just do you, how do you, what is your decision when, how do you make your decision when you're, it's like Oracle or Tarot? Like when do you?
yeah, I mean, that's interesting because for a long time, I mean, I guess I still do this. I guess since I got my I don't know, third or fourth deck, I've always been somebody, like, one of the weird little things about my specific human personality is I love taking things that aren't necessarily supposed to go together and unifying them all into one thing. Like, that's just one of my things. And I don't know where it came from, but I just love it. Like, I used to write short stories when I was in high school about like all the characters from Star Trek and all the characters from Star Wars, like meeting.
Yeah, right on.
Like,
I
why
love
not?
that.
Space,
Right?
all my other like little kid friends are like arguing which is the better movie, and I'm just like, I'm writing in my own movie where they all hang out together.
Yeah.
Just how awesome would that be?
Right.
So pretty early on, I started doing almost all my readings. I would use multiple decks, so I would take cards from multiple decks. And in the beginning, like when I only had 3 decks, I would take one from each, and that was pretty easy. Once I started developing a whole collection, now what I typically do is I just go over to my table where they're all laid out, and I really just like grab whatever my intuition speaks to me and says this is the right deck for this person. It is a little challenging now because I have so many experience with so many of the decks that I kind of know, like, oh, this one kind of tends to speak this way and this one tends to speak that way. So I have to keep my ego out of my intellectualism and ego out of the way, so that I'm really just taking the decks that feel right, rather than like somebody will say to me, like, they want a reading about their financial situation. And I kind of know now that there are card decks that have like kind of like a lot of cards that have good financial news in them. And so, but sometimes that's, I'll still get the intuitive tug to use that deck, but it's important to me that it's the intuition and not like my ego wanting to give them good info, wanting to control the message and give them good financial news. Because that one of the reason I love the cards so much, I think why they work so well for me as a spiritual guide, is that is one of my number one issues with getting into my own tuition, and whatever guidance might be flowing from whatever your concept of higher power is through me for other people, is that my intellectual brain wants to jump in and control what I tell people and figure it out logically, and make it like correct from the ego's perspective, and then give it to people. And that's actually not guidance. That's just me trying to tell other people what to do. And so it's really important for me to clear the channel, and to really just kind of, well, the cards do it for me. I think that's why I love them, is because I have friends who consider themselves to be sort of purely psychic, and they can kind of tune into someone's energy or look them in the eyes or whatever, and they feel like they get it can be in different forms, but pictures or words or scenes,
but information
from
their
again
energy,
whatever the concept of higher power is, that sort of gets downloaded into their mind, and then they just sort of tell people. For me, the challenge with anything in that realm, which gets into my medium work, which we'll talk about another time, but my intellect and my ego really want to get involved when I give guidance, and it's really important to keep them out. So the cards, and I think especially the oracle cards in the beginning for me, were the device that's like, the whole first part of the message I don't have anything to do with, because it's on the card, So and each card, even in tarot, each card has a certain meaning that I'm not allowed to mess with. It's not up to me. The interpretation that comes from my intuition afterwards is like sort of seeing the cards laid out and seeing what the general messages for each card is, and again, if it's a spread, depending on, whether it's a spread or not, whatever. So I do use my intuition once the cards are sort of all laid out and chosen, because then I feel like there is a message that part of it does need to, like, how it all fits together is something that I'm very good at intuitively understanding and communicating.
right?
But the good news is, like, the big piece at the beginning of like, what is the general message here? That's determined by the universe, because the universe is picking the card.
Right.
So it gives me this big flashing alert in the beginning that not to let my intellect and my ego sort of get in the way and interrupt the flow of information that's meant for this person. And there's just a practical thing where, like, the initial meetings, I'm literally not in control of them, so my ego can't control them. So it's
Well,
almost like,
and something I keep hearing you say throughout this whole conversation is feeling.
yeah, yeah, it's far more of an emotional experience than a intellectual experience, for sure. I mean, when people do readings, and when I do readings for someone, I usually ask them, like, is there a particular area of life you would like some guidance about, or you just like to hear what your intuition has to say more clearly? Is there a question in your life that's been bothering you, or that's been gnawing at you that you'd like some information about? And for me, that's all about, it's about feelings, even though there is intellectual information there. Like, if someone is dating someone and they're having a bump in the road and they would like some more information about it, of course we're asking, higher power, spirit, whatever, for information about that. So we have to kind of interpret the cards in line with that. So there's a little bit of intellectualization, but for the most part, it's emotional. It's about what the person is feeling and what that energy means, and what energy they might be encountering. That's another thing that's really, Colette Baron Reed has really helped me, because she talks about, and I try to stick with this because for me it works better. She says she doesn't give predictions with card reading. She gives prescriptions, meaning
Ooh.
she'll tell, the cards inform the person getting the reading about what kind of energy, what kind of circumstances might be in the offing, either in the present, if you just need more clarity and understanding the present, or in the future, which you can't see currently. But it's not, she doesn't do readings of like, oh, your grandmother is going to die in 7 months, or, and I don't do that either. I find those, I think there are people that can, that can read the future and can get detailed, that's their gift. For me, I don't like doing it, and I also don't like receiving it, because for me, if I get a card reading from another reader and they say, oh, a big sum of money is gonna come in April, that it's my fault, my responsibility, not the readers, but they've actually helped create a problem for me, because from then on, my ego, my intellect is going to be like, where's the money in April? It's April 1st, where's the money? And really, both the reading itself and whatever should come from it is best coming from a flow state where you're not forcing anything. We talked before this episode about how you just had a marvelous experience with your family where you didn't force anything. In fact, you had a long period of not forcing anything with them. And then this family situation came together from all your other family members arranging it. And you were just there, like, enjoying it and receiving it. And that's really the best way that readings happen, and also the things from the readings happen. So I'm far happier when I'm getting a reading from someone, them saying, your financial channel is really open right now. I just think that there's going to be a lot of really great financial things happening for you in the near future.
That feels good when you say that versus the other.
Like,
and going back to feeling.
Exactly. It helps me feel good. If somebody says you're going to get a check for $3,000 in April, it almost does I think for some people that would actually make them feel happy, and they can have that information and then kind of let go of it. When I get numbers, my family's always had a weird thing with numbers. My sister and I talk about this, and like, my ego and my intellect get very involved when I hear numbers. So if somebody says you're going to get a $3,000 check in April, like, literally, I'm just like, when is April 1st coming? And then, like, April 1st, I'm like, everybody I talk to is like, do you have my $3,000? Which is really sort of telling the universe the opposite. Like, don't send me money because I'm stressed about it. And, I really, what it's saying is I don't have full faith that it's coming. If I'm looking everywhere for it, like, where is it? That's actually like not trusting the universe is bringing it. And the universe can kind of say, oh, okay, you don't want it in April. Okay, we'll hold off then. So that doesn't really work for me, but it works for some people. I think some people, I've seen some people have a real gift for, like, not just.
And so what have the cards done for you?
What's that?
Utilizing the cards in your life on a regular basis, what has it given you?
I think for me, it's really my form of Yeah, I think it's really how I connect to what I consider my concept of higher power and spirit. It's my prayer and meditation, honestly.
Mm.
Um, and I feel like I'm sort of spiritually limited in that way. Like a lot of people use prayer, no matter what their religion is, they use prayer as a way to communicate with their higher power. A lot of people use meditation. I don't know. I struggle. I am diagnosed with ADD. I'm diagnosed with anxiety. Like I have a lot of crazy stuff going upstairs. So like sometimes when I try to meditate or sometimes when I try to pray, it's like it's like
Not
chaos.
happening, huh?
And the thing
Wow.
about the card readings is, I know I have to get quiet. I have to get centered. Sometimes I do say a little prayer, but at the very minimum, I usually like do a thing where I clear the energy of the cards and shuffle them. And that,
Hmm.
even just that little piece is sort of like a state. It's like a physical act. That's a statement that like, okay, I'm sort of relaxing my ego, my intellect to let them get out of the way here. And I'm opening up to a channel greater than myself. Well, I guess I would say from my higher self and things greater than myself to
Hmm.
come in and inform me about anything I might need to know,
Mm.
or to strengthen anything I know but needs to be stronger within me.
Yeah.
And I find it's helpful right before I go to bed, because then sort of I'm usually like excited for the next day, because it sort of
Oh,
tells me like what kind of energy I might be working with the next few, either the
yeah.
next day or next few days.
Yeah.
And it also places me in this kind of nice position of like I've just communicated with spirit,
Mm.
and I feel connected to that, as I kind of like, go off into dreamland.
Yourself. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I
And
love
and
it.
I usually I have like a little stand for my car. Actually, I have multiple, but I have one right by my bedside. And so I usually put the card, or if it's two,
Nice.
every now and
Yeah.
then I do two or three, but usually it's just one. I
Yeah.
put it by my bedside, in the card holder. So when I wake up, it's one of the first things I see. And I remember,
Yeah.
doing the reading the night before. I'm like, oh yeah, today's going to have this, or the next few days is going to have this. That's
Beautiful.
cool.
Yeah. So doing a little pre-paving.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
also saved my butt sometimes.
Yeah.
I remember really clearly, um, I did a reading for myself one night, and it was something about like in your work situation, be very careful, because
Uh,
you're going to be presented with some challenging situations. It's really important for you to be calm and to not overreact. And I was like, I don't know what that's talking about, because I didn't have anything. I didn't have any
yeah.
meetings scheduled that day, whatever. And then I get to work, and there's a surprise meeting scheduled for the afternoon that I have to go to. And it's this contentious, like everybody's getting triggered, and I was getting triggered. And, but I had that reading like fully in my mind, like be
Right.
calm, don't say anything more than you absolutely have to, like don't engage, don't get
Wow.
crazy.
That's great.
And like I knew when I walked out of that meeting, like if I hadn't done that card reading for myself, I would have shot my mouth off.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I would have made real trouble for myself. Not
Wow.
unrecoverable, but I would have
Yeah.
made my week harder. And because of the reading, I was able to like just hang in there. And then it was just like the meeting was stressful, but then it was over. And it was
That's
really remarkable.
great. That's a great story. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great place for us to wrap up,
Yeah.
because it pretty much says it all right there, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much for your questions. Those are good questions.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for sharing. I now know
Yeah.
more. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully it's
Awesome.
helpful for people
Yeah.
watching or
I
listening.
think so. Most definitely.
So thank you, those of you who did listen or watch. We really appreciate it.
Yes.
Stephanie's an amazing life coach, and they can reach you
Yeah.
at.
Uh, if you Google power in joy, the word in joy, transformational life coach, and the website's powerinjoy.com. Yeah. And I offer a free 30-minute discovery session. I want to know all about you and what you want.
And you can reach me at collinworster.com, which is COLLINWORSTER.com. And we'll try to
He's
put those links.
fabulous.
We'll try to put those links and email addresses and everything in the comments of YouTube and the information area of the podcast and everything. But thanks for
Awesome.
joining us, everybody.
I'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, we really appreciate you listening and or watching, and we'll see you next week. Bye.